What's happening, y'all? Welcome inside the Fantasy Stock Exchange. Danny and Bush coming at you today with a 2023 rookie mock draft, 2-round edition that we are going to be breaking down with landing spots. As always, when we do these kind of mock drafts, I got to shout out the person who made them. This is from Ben Rolfe over at Pro Football Network. He dropped a 3-round mock draft, so we're going to take his mock draft as if it's the real NFL draft and do a Dynasty rookie mock draft as a exercise. I'll talk about the benefits after the intro, but you guys know we did one of these about a week ago. We did a bunch of these last offseason. You guys seem to really enjoy them. So definitely like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff if you enjoy. Danny, how you doing?
Doing well. And you guys would see that the first round would be the green players, second round would be the yellow players, and third round would be the orange players when we bring up the graphic on the screen. So for those of you curious in terms of the landing spot, in terms of the draft capital, it should be pretty evident. Also, the one disclaimer I want to make is this mock draft was conducted prior to Blake Corum announcing he will return to Michigan. So as you guys can see there on the screen, Blake Corum would have went to the Miami Dolphins in the third round. We're not going to be including him in this exercise.
Yeah, exactly. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, so as I mentioned, there's a couple reasons why we want to be doing mock drafts like this. Obviously, don't go down to the comments and say this mock draft isn't realistic. This pick would never happen. That pick would never happen. A, it's the NFL draft. Anything can happen. And B, this is more of a anecdotal type of exercise. We're not necessarily saying we think these players will go here. We're just conducting a Dynasty rookie mock draft as if they go here. So we get some good practice, some good exercise in for our actual rookie drafts. And also, these are just fun to do in general. And it gives us an idea of where, players are going relative to draft capital wise and some fun fits that we might be rooting for on draft night. So that's basically the whole reasoning behind this exercise. If this is the first time you guys are checking out one of these, but let's get it kicked off. Again, this is a 2-round superflex rookie mock draft. Danny's going to go on odds. I'm going to go on evens. We're going to kind of just alternate picks. Not going to get too in the weeds with like player analysis of each of these college prospects. We've done that, kind of over the last couple of weeks. I did top 5 rankings at each position. I did a video titled Everything You Need to Know About 2023 Rookie Picks, talking about each positional outlook. So if you want more information on the players, go check that video out. But Danny, I'll let you get it kicked off with the 101.
For sure, and you'll soon see that this draft was very favorable if you own a ton of first-round capital in 2023. A ton of quarterbacks going in the top 10 in particular. You'll see that quite soon. However, even with the quarterbacks going high, even with obviously in super flex leagues, the need for the quarterback position to be set, and this draft in particular filling that accordingly. Bijan Robinson, first overall pick. No matter where he goes, he's going to be the first overall pick unless he, got unforeseen falls to day 3, which would never happen. I mean, we're talking about the best prospect at running back since Saquon Barkley 2018. Bijan Robinson brings the full package: size, speed, athleticism, receiving ability, landing on a team like the Dallas Cowboys, who have been one of the best teams in terms of expected PPR points amongst their running backs. We know that they got a solid offensive line. We know that they're a team that can put up a ton of points. And Bijan Robinson, if he lands on the Cowboys, can instantly be a running back 1, maybe even a top 5 running back in fantasy as soon as year 1.
Yeah, and we'd have to assume, obviously, if they're making this pick, that they maybe cut bait with Ezekiel Elliott, or maybe they do a contract restructure or something like that. Tony Pollard probably off in free agency to a new destination, a new team. Makes sense, just, plug and play Bijan Robinson. If he slides this far in the NFL draft, he goes 27th overall in this mock draft. He's probably one of the best 3 to 5 players in this draft. And of course, he's a running back, so he's probably going to slide a little bit as a result. But, he shouldn't be falling all the way to 27th overall. I think the Cowboys would probably view this similarly to the CeeDee Lamb pick that they made a couple years ago, where it wasn't necessarily a huge need for them, but it definitely was the best player available on the clock. So 101, Bijan Robinson, definitely makes a ton of sense there. 102, I'm going with Bryce Young, who was the first of 4 quarterbacks selected in the top 10, second overall to the Houston Texans. We obviously know now, after the Week 18 games, that the Houston Texans won against the Indianapolis Colts and no longer are in possession of the first overall pick. In this guy's mock draft, he has the first overall pick going to the Chicago Bears. They're just going to stick and pick, take a defensive player, which could definitely happen. But I do think we might see some movement, maybe a team trying to hop up over Houston to get Bryce Young if they view him as the clear-cut number 1 quarterback. But I mean, the fit's pretty easy here. He'd have, we don't actually know if Lovie Smith is going to stick around. That's the tough thing. We don't know exactly what the scheme is going to be for Bryce Young, but if Lovie Smith is one and done, if he's fired, or maybe he's fired after Bryce Young's rookie season, you'd imagine they'd probably bring in some young offensive mind or something to help tutor the young quarterback. But either way, I do actually enjoy the fit. And I think good offensive line, relatively speaking, for a bad team, and a defense that was a little underrated this year.
A name that's been circling around in Houston has actually been Josh McCown, which would be pretty funny if he went back to Houston, accepted a coaching job there. Obviously, we know Bryce Young, fantastic electric player for the Alabama Crimson Tide, former Heisman Trophy winner, would be basically the perfect case scenario. If you're Houston, you fall from 1 to 2 and you still get your top quarterback on your board. Absolutely going to be worth this pick. So love Bryce Young. Transitioning to the next quarterback and the 6th overall pick, going to the Detroit Lions, who, in my opinion, are probably the best landing spot for a young quarterback, is going to be Anthony Richardson, quarterback of the Florida Gators. And when it comes to Anthony Richardson, he couldn't have asked for a better landing spot. Obviously, as we know, if you guys watch Florida football, if you guys watch Anthony Richardson play, he's very raw. We know that. He's not going to come in. He's not going to be, this safe starter, if you will. However, the ceiling is untapped from anybody in this entire class. Height, weight, speed, athleticism, arm talent. I mean, this guy has all of the traits that you look for in the perfect nesting spot with Detroit. You got a number 1 wide receiver, got a really good offensive line, you got a really good running back. If you can get Anthony Richardson to come close to his ceiling, this is a legitimate top 5 overall startup pick. Think in terms of what Trey Lance kind of represented a few years ago, where 3rd overall pick, insulated system. We still believe in the talent. We still believe in the upside of Trey Lance. He's unfortunately been dealing with some injuries and the presence of Jimmy Garoppolo. I think that if Anthony Richardson landed in Detroit, he would be that next guy in terms of, you got Trey Lance, you got Anthony Richardson. If both hit their peaks, they're legitimately going to be game changers in Superflex.
Yeah, and a lot of you guys maybe that are big college football fans might say, Anthony Richardson isn't ready. I don't believe in him. Whatever the case is, if the NFL takes him 6th overall, they obviously believe in him, and he's going to have an opportunity to start. Maybe not right away because he goes to Detroit in this scenario where they have Jared Goff under contract. He played well this past year, but if you draft his quarterback 6th overall, he's eventually going to play. And maybe a year of development would help out Anthony Richardson because inaccuracy is by far his biggest problem. Only like a 55% completion percentage this past year, but this would be a very, very fun fit in the long term. And if you were a rebuilding dynasty team, I'm sure you would have no problems taking Anthony Richardson with a top 4 rookie pick for sure. Another quarterback comes off the board with the next pick here. I'm going to select CJ Stroud, who went 5th overall to the Indianapolis Colts. I think this is a very, very common fit that we're going to see throughout the entirety of mock draft season, that Indianapolis is going to take CJ Stroud if they're not going to trade up ahead of Houston for Bryce Young. I think this is the quarterback that they would end up selecting. Will Levis, I'm sure, will be in consideration for them as well. But CJ Stroud probably made himself a lot of money, a lot of, doubters silenced a little bit in the game that he had against Georgia in the college football semifinal. I think a lot of people, myself included, expected him to struggle against such a good defense, but we saw not only did he not struggle, he actually showcased a little bit of mobility that we didn't expect that he actually had to. We'll have to see how he kind of matures through this draft cycle. If we see more of that mobility unlocked on his pro day throws and stuff like that, that could be something that NFL teams are curious to see. And CJ Stroud to the Colts makes just a ton of sense to me. In theory, you have a good offensive line, a run game, number 1 receiver. It's a pretty decent landing spot.
Yeah, for sure. And when it comes to CJ Stroud, I do agree that he showed a lot of haters, a lot of, critics, that he can play out of structure. Because I don't think anybody questioned his ability to play in structure, stay in the pocket, go through his reads, make accurate decisions, accurate throws down the field. Everybody understood that he could do that. But the trait that the elite quarterbacks have, the trait that the top 10 quarterbacks in the league have, our ability to, when the script isn't right, when a defender's in his face, can he make someone miss? Can he shimmy to the side? Can he throw a dart 45 yards down the field off balance? And he showed against Georgia that he has some of that off script ability. So I do think that was the biggest building block of his entire college career towards getting extremely high draft capital. And as we know with Indianapolis, got a set wide receiver 1 there. Obviously the offensive line struggled this year, but we know it's talented enough to bounce right back. I think if CJ Stroud landed there, it would be well worth that 104 pick. Transitioning to my next pick, it's going to be the 2nd running back drafted in the 1st round in this predictive mock. We got Philadelphia Eagles selecting Jahmyr Gibbs, running back of the Alabama Crimson Tide, 31st overall with the final 1st round pick. And when it comes to Jahmyr Gibbs, everybody's going to throw out the comp of Alvin Kamara, even if he doesn't become, that full-fledged top 3 level fantasy back. He could be an Aaron Jones type. And if you're landing in a situation with Philadelphia, the best offensive line in the league, a mobile quarterback, a ton of points scored in that opportunity, and obviously the best receiving back that team has had as their starter, probably since LaShawn McCoy. Like, we're genuinely dealing with a pure 3-down back with Jahmyr Gibbs. Obviously, we'll see, how he tests in terms of his weight. But if he's going 31st overall, I'm assuming that's going to be a non-issue for NFL teams.
Yeah, that's the only question mark he has. The film is good. He's not Alvin Kamara from like a contact balance perspective,
Agreed.
which makes sense because Alvin Kamara is about 15 pounds heavier than Jahmyr Gibbs, at least at his listed weight. But he does have that receiving ability, the ability to take things to the house, which I think he has a sixth gear or whatever that Alvin Kamara probably doesn't even have, that top end speed. And I think Gibbs will showcase that at the combine and probably get him drafted in the first round if he's able to run in like the 4.3s or something like that. So 106 is the final quarterback of the top 10. As we talked about in this mock draft, Ben believes that, a lot of quarterbacks are going in the first round. Whether you believe that or not, we have to be prepared for that scenario, which is why we're doing mock drafts like this. Will Levis go 7th overall to the Las Vegas Raiders? There's a lot of chatter that he is a first round quarterback in the eyes of the NFL. Again, whether we believe that is yet to be determined. We haven't watched this film and sat down and kind of grinded through it. But at Kentucky, a lot of things that he dealt with this year. Injuries. He was dealing with, I believe it was an ankle injury or something like that, which limited his mobility. The offensive line was really bad. The supporting cast was really bad. The coaching wasn't great. If you go back to his film last year, he was much better from that perspective. So NFL teams are going to try and piece together this quarterback prospect that has, arm talent, has mobility, has obviously maturity. He's an older prospect. I'm sure he's going to test well and do well on the whiteboard and all that kind of stuff that NFL teams are going to like. And that's probably going to get him drafted inside the top 10, inside the top 15, or at least in the first round in general. So Will Levis, again, if you don't like him, you don't have to select him here. This is just where I think he should go, given the draft capital that he received. 7th overall quarterback. He's going to be insulated for a couple years as a starting option for the Las Vegas Raiders, assuming they move on from Derek Carr. I think it's a good fit as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I mean, Will Levis at his peak could maybe be a more mobile version of Derek Carr. Obviously, a big arm, athletic ability, big size, like 6'4", 230 pounds. He would be, like kind of, in my opinion, like a B plus version of a prospect that Anthony Richardson is. But apparently, he's actually more heralded in NFL circles. So it goes to show, they value that SEC experience for both guys, that toughness in the pocket. And if Will Levis lands on the Raiders at 7th overall, well worth this top 6 overall pick in our own Superflex rookie mock draft. So we can move on to the next pick in the wide receiver 1 off the board in our mock, the wide receiver 2 off the board in this particular mock from Ben. That's going to be Jordan Addison, 12th overall to the Houston Texans. Already mentioned his quote unquote teammate here with Bryce Young going 2nd overall, but it's a match made in heaven. You're getting Bryce, that wide receiver 1, that pure separator, really good hands, can contribute at all 3 levels of the field, winning deep, winning in the intermediate, winning after the catch. I mean, we saw what Jordan Addison was able to do to Kenny Pickett just a couple years ago, built off that season this first year at USC, working with Caleb Williams. Yeah, I mean, you could argue this guy's the best overall wide receiver in the class. At least he's going to be the most pro ready, and landing on a spot with Bryce, building that chemistry, building that long-term connection. This could be a guy that contributes maybe 1,000 yards as a rookie.
Yeah, and I think you look at that offense suddenly, if John Mechie can come back and make a full recovery, Nico Collins showed a little bit in his 3rd year in the NFL. He's probably, those 3 guys could make up a nice little receiving core. They have a left tackle in Laramie Tunsil. Some of their offensive line pieces started to work themselves out this year. Suddenly you look at this offense, if they have the right guy at coach to be able to architect this thing, it could be pretty fun. It could be maybe this year's Jacksonville Jaguars kind of thing that we saw out of Trevor Lawrence if Bryce Young can kind of hit the ground running. So I like that fit. I think Addison would probably slide further than this, given that, some people aren't a fan of his game, his weight, stuff like that. And also the Houston Texans aren't the sexiest landing spot in the world. It's not like he went to the Chargers or something like that. So I'm sure some people would take him down near the 109, 110 type of area. And I would be scooping up that discount all day long. 12th overall draft capital for a paired alongside a young quarterback, to me, is a good fit. 108, Jaxon Smith-Njigba, again, another guy you could make the argument is the best receiver in the class. 15th overall to the New England Patriots. I think this is an awesome fit because Jacoby Myers is a free agent. Jaxon Smith-Njigba played primarily out of the slot at Ohio State alongside Chris Olave, alongside Garrett Wilson, where he matched them in production and oftentimes outproduced those guys. He had a banged up hamstring-stricken season this year, but NFL teams are going to go off his sophomore tape. As long as he can test well, he's probably not going to have any concerns being drafted this high. And Jaxon Smith-Njigba, to me, is like the next guy in line of the over-scrutinized route runner types that people are going to, pick on for no reason. People did it with Olave last year. People did it with Justin Jefferson in 2020. People did it with Devontae Smith in 2021. I think he's just the next guy in line that has that kind of PPR archetype that we're looking for in fantasy. And the Patriots, I mean, Mac Jones didn't have a great year this year, but if he bounces back and he has a guy like Jaxon Smith-Njigba to lean on, then it's possible that Mac Jones can get him the ball. Think about some of the best receivers in fantasy this year. Justin Jefferson has Kirk Cousins. He doesn't have, Patrick Mahomes throwing him the ball. You don't necessarily need that. You just need a capable quarterback to get you the ball. And I think JSN, if he's the talent that we saw his sophomore year, could really take advantage of that.
Yeah, I feel like the New England offense is one that could, see a really, really big stride, really, really big trend up this offseason. Hire, an actual professional offensive coordinator instead of having, Bill Belichick and Matt and Patricia basically, Beavis and Butthead their way to offense this entire year, which is basically what's been happening. There's a reason why your young quarterback took a big down step in his second year because he didn't have the adequate coaching. Losing Josh McDaniels was a big, big reason why Mac Jones didn't really look the same. This offense didn't really look the same. You get a proper offensive coordinator. You get Jaxon Smith-Njigba, who, I mean, everybody's going to throw around this comp, but quite literally is just Amon St. Brown, only with proper recognition. Like, that's the type of role he could play. Give yourself, an established wide receiver one. Even if he only has to play in the slot in year one, so be it. Get that slot plus type of wide receiver for Mac Jones. I would love this fit. Top 15 overall draft capital. Obviously, we know from the peripheral standpoint, this is a guy who outproduced 2,000-yard rookie wide receivers this past year with Olave and Garrett Wilson, his final year at college. So, yeah, love Jaxon Smith-Njigba. We move on to the next receiver. And probably, I mean, not probably, the most imposing, the most physically imposing wide receiver of the top three this year. Quentin Johnston, 11th overall to the Tennessee Titans. This is an interesting fit. The reason being is that I don't think Quentin Johnston, as much as I love him, I think he's probably, in my opinion, the number one wide receiver in this class. I don't think he's going to be this pure separator right off the bat. I actually think that it might be a Treylon Burks level transition for him year one, where, he'll play that yards after catcher role. He'll play that high point role, only he's probably a more refined X at this point than Burks is. I just think that they're very similar receivers in terms of what they can do athletically with the football in their hands. It would be interesting, though, if Brian Tannehill is back, if you add Quentin Johnston to this offense. Obviously, we're going to need that passing rate to go up. This would be by far, in my opinion, the worst of the top three receiver landing spots, which is why he's the third off the board. However, as we know in Dynasty, you got to draft for talent. Yeah, it could look bad right now, but with Caleb Williams, the quarterback for the Tennessee Titans, a year in advance.
Yeah, there's a lot can change. And Johnston, while he would slide a little bit, given that these guys are all kind of in the same tier, he would still not be sliding below the next guy that we're going to talk about just because he goes to the Kansas City Chiefs. And that guy is Josh Downs, who went 30th overall to the Kansas City Chiefs in this mock draft. Interesting fit, given that they have Sky Moore, who they spent a pick on last year in the second round, who we still have some faith in. I mean, the target rate was good, but that's pretty much all you could take away from his rookie season. Juju Smith-Schuster's on a one-year deal. I would assume this means he's not back with the team. Josh Downs could actually play a pseudo Tyreek Hill role. Josh Downs played primarily on the outside at UNC, but if they wanted to move him into the slot and get him, a lot of touches over the middle, I think he could, the role that Tyreek Hill started playing in Kansas City was he was the deep threat. He got, work downfield, but then he slowly kind of transitioned over his Kansas City Chiefs career into a heavy target type of guy. And I think Josh Downs would be a really great fit. And he showed during his time at UNC, over a 30% target share each of the last 2 years, making, Sam Howell and Drake May's life easier as a result. I think Josh Downs to the Chiefs is a great, great fit at 110 here.
Yeah, I mean, very similar to what he brings to the table. I feel like there's one of these guys in every class. Your Jahan Dotson, your Elijah Moore, these vertical slots that can play that Tyler Lockett type of role if they hit their ceiling in the NFL. Josh Downs is the next one. I mean, I absolutely love him. I think he's the clear, top of the tier 2 wide receivers in this class. Maybe he isn't as physically imposing as a Quentin Johnston, or maybe isn't as savvy of a route runner as a JSN or a Jordan Addison, but he's just a really good football player, lands in a fantastic spot, could potentially be a big contributor in year one, especially as you mentioned, if Juju Smith-Schuster leaves. So really, really like Josh Downs. I definitely think he's worth a late first, given the capital invested into him with the Chiefs, given the landing spot there. So the 111 for me, though, is going to be Sean Tucker, running back of the Syracuse Orange. And this is your guy. I mean, you've been all over Sean Tucker. He's been your guy from the start of the cycle, height, weight, speed, good runner, good pass catcher, lands 54th overall to the New York Giants. Obviously, in this scenario, we're assuming that Saquon Barkley has left in free agency. And if that's the case, you're getting day 2 draft capital for Sean Tucker in a clear volume situation. Saquon Barkley, one of the biggest workloads in the entire NFL. If Sean Tucker lands there, I mean, you got a young up-and-coming coach with Brian Dable. You got Daniel Jones, who proved that he could be a solid NFL quarterback. Maybe never a top 10 guy, but probably in the 15 to 20 range. You add Sean Tucker to this offense, I think he can be an RB2 as soon as his first year in New York.
Yeah, I think it's a great fit. Again, he wrote in the write-up that he is assuming Saquon Barkley were to leave in free agency in this scenario. Maybe he just gets franchise tagged and they trade him or something like that. We don't exactly know, but if Sean Tucker gets a workload in New York, he's definitely worth the 111 here. Zach Charbonnet is what closes out the first round for me. RB 61st overall to the Buffalo Bills. Zach Charbonnet, a guy that I have become very much enthralled with his ability, his workload, his size, his productivity the last couple of years that he's been at UCLA. He pretty much brings everything to the table. He's very, very elusive for his size, which I think is a very underrated trait. And I think some of the best big backs that we've seen come out in recent years, Tyler Algiers and Ramondre Stevenson types, those guys are big backs, but they're elusive. And I think that's what Zach Charbonnet kind of brings to the table in that kind of mold at 6 foot, 220 pounds, who's probably going to test pretty well. He's a senior. So, I mean, that hurts his profile a little bit, but he is a running back. It's not like he's a wide receiver or something like that. And he was productive prior to this year.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you guys watched him, even back in his Michigan days, this has been a very good, very physical between the tackles runner. Showed that he can contribute on third down this year as well. Obviously, he's not going to be, this wiggly fucking Jahmyr Gibbs type of running back because he's so big. But ultimately, if he could play a James Conner type of role in the NFL, where you got a big back and contribute on all 3 downs, punching some touchdowns, especially in Buffalo, man, touchdown scoring opportunity there. If you're Buffalo, the reason why you're running Josh Allen as much as you do inside the 5, inside the 10-yard line, is because you got a 5'6", 205-pound running back behind him, and James Cook, who's 6 foot, 190 pounds. Like, you don't have a physical bruising goal line type of running back, so you're using your 250-pound quarterback to do so. Enter Charbonnet, who's 220, 225, big physical between the tackles grinder to an offense that we're expecting to score 30 points per game. Absolutely worth this 112, in my opinion. Transitioning off of Charbonnet, we actually head to the next wide receiver off the board, and the final first-round pick of this entire mock draft in terms of the player landing spot. We got Kayshon Boutte of the LSU Tigers going 16th overall to the Green Bay Packers. Kind of feels like for you a similar situation to last year, where a receiver you don't like ends up with the Green Bay Packers. Didn't like Christian Watson coming into the year, got drafted by the Packers. Kayshon Boutte, a lot of question marks in terms of the personality there, in terms of the production the last couple of years. But I mean, I do think if he gets it all together, if he can really focus himself in the next level, he could be a very good receiver. But I'll let you, take away some of your thoughts, and I can add on with Kayshon Boutte here.
Yeah, I think some of the allure of the Packers offense might be gone because it may seem that Green Bay has, had their last days with Aaron Rodgers. We might be talking about Jordan Love's number 2 wide receiver here, but I still think Boutte would be worthy of going, in the early second round range. The question is, some people have him very highly sought after as potentially the best receiver, one of the top 3 receivers in the draft, and maybe he goes a little bit higher. This is about where I would value him as well.
Yep, no, agreed there. And when it comes to Boutte, if you guys haven't watched him, really quick, good, elusive player after the catch. If he hits a ceiling, could be like an AJ Brown type in terms of that physical after the catch type of nature he brings to the game, but just has to really take a step up from what we've seen these last couple of years.
Yeah, exactly. Production stunted a little bit after his, the stretch he had during his sophomore year. Where he was really, a touchdown monster at one point during that year. We move on to Michael Mayer, who's been one of the most productive tight ends really we're going to see in a while. Coming out of college, a guy that's putting up like 700-800 receiving yards, 8 touchdowns, like 30% of his team's targets. You just don't see tight ends at the college level see that kind of involvement. And Notre Dame has historically used their tight ends pretty well. But Michael Mayer is kind of a different animal. He's going to, again, another thing that we're going to talk about with Michael Mayer is people think he's going to test like Cole Kmet. I don't think so. I think he's going to test a lot better than that. He's probably going to run like high 4.5s, which for his size at 250, 6'4" is going to be more than adequate, like weight adjusted size for him. So I think Michael Mayer, he goes 37th overall to the Los Angeles Rams in this example. I mean, you're getting a much better version of Tyler Higbee. And we saw Tyler Higbee, his ability to command targets in that offense. We don't exactly know what's going to happen with McVay, if he's going to be sticking around or not. But if Matthew Stafford is back, I think Mayer has a good opportunity in his rookie year and going forward.
I think it's like a pretty easy comp and one that a lot of people will point to. But we've seen, TJ Hawkinson this year really evolve once he got traded to the Vikings. That would be, the type of comp you see for Mayer where, he's not going to test as a 4.4 athlete. He's not going to be, like from an athletic perspective, like the next guy we're going to talk about. But, he's going to have some PPR allure. He's going to play good on all 3 downs. He's going to be a really good safety valve for a Los Angeles Rams team where realistically outside of Cooper Kupp last year, they did not have a single weapon that could separate on a down-to-down basis. You get Michael Mayer added there, give Matthew Stafford, that safety blanket, especially on third downs if teams are doubling Cooper Kupp. I think that's a phenomenal pick, like you said. Moving on, though, 203, and it's kind of a yin and yang where, Mayer's the safe, PPRS type of prospect where, he's probably going to figure in, the tight end 4 to tight end 8 range on any given year. But this next guy's probably the freakiest athlete we've seen at tight end since Kyle Pitts. Darnell Washington, obviously of the Georgia Bulldogs, playing tonight. 47th overall to the Detroit Lions. Just want to mention that this is the perfect landing spot with Detroit. You get Anthony Richardson, a freaky quarterback. You already have a wide receiver one there. You just let Darnell Washington be that efficient down the seam type of playmaker. We're looking at a 6'7", 275-pound tight end that could legitimately run 4.45. That is the level of athlete. That is the level of freak that we are getting here. Detroit's just going to be building the all Monstars offense apparently if they follow this mock draft, but I'm all for it. Obviously, Darnell Washington, the biggest question mark would be his production at the collegiate level, but this is a guy that every single scout you see, including myself, to a certain degree, will point to the fact that we think this guy's going to be a better pro. He's playing on a team right now with Brock Bowers, Reek Gilbert, and himself, one of the best tight end cores we have ever seen assembled at the collegiate level. I do think if he's able to get the spotlight, if he's able to get that shine, Darnell Washington could be a very, very good number 2 weapon in this offense behind Amon St. Brown.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of tight end help there in Detroit since Hawkinson's been gone. I mean, We've seen Brock Wright even get into the end zone a couple times. 204 here we go. Tank Bigsby to the Cardinals, 67th overall. Again, another guy that wasn't all that efficient, all that productive at the collegiate level. Auburn was kind of a huge dumpster fire, tire fire this year. But Tank Bigsby, when you separate him from the Auburn offense, has traits. He can run, he can catch, he's physical, he's productive early on in his college career. As a freshman, he got on the Devy radar pretty quick. He's probably going to test well. He has kind of like the Cam Akers allure to him. When Cam Akers was coming out of Florida State, just a complete dumpster fire offense around Cam Akers. But when you separated him from the rest of the offense, you saw a player that could be productive at the NFL level. And I think that's what you get with Tank Bigsby. I don't know exactly how this would work out. Probably he'd be backing up James Conner in that first year. But then, maybe as the season goes along, he's able to work himself back into the offense there in Arizona. I think the fit's pretty good, though, at the top of the third round.
Yeah, no, 100%. That height, weight, speed type of guy to fill in for Connor if he was to leave after this year. I think that would be a very good fit on an offense that we've seen to really, prop up, less than elite talents at the running back position, if you will. We've seen, James Conner have some games, Benjamin, even Keontae Ingram at spots this year. I think that if you add a guy like Tank Bigsby, who's shown that he can operate on a full workload this year and moving forward, he could be an RB2 type in fantasy as well. I agree. Moving on to the next pick, though, is going to be Hendon Hooker, quarterback, going to the 39th overall to the Carolina Panthers. Very, very efficient quarterback at Tennessee. Realistically, for the last 2 years has been phenomenal. You look at his touchdown interception ratio. You look at his completion percentage, accuracy down the field. I mean, he basically led a Tennessee team with, top 15 level expectations to the number 1 team overall in the country at one point this year prior to getting hurt. We know that he's talented. We know that he can basically fill in as the quarterback 1 on Carolina as soon as day 1, as soon as he recovers from that ACL. I think he could be their starting quarterback. Main question there, of course, is what exactly are we getting coming off that ACL? Obviously an older prospect, not really a great nest, if you will, in terms of Carolina. There are question marks there. However, given the quarterback talent, given the quarterback equity in Superflex, 205 seems like the right dart to throw at him.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a sketchy fit because, given the ACL tear, you don't know exactly how quickly he's going to get back on the field. They also drafted Matt Corral in the 3rd round last year, who I thought was, had some ability and had some traits. Is it like a QB competition there going forward? I think it might be like you might have no quarterback after this season, after the 2023 season. You're just back to the drawing board and you might have to draft a quarterback in 2024. Williams. To me, I'd probably rather build up the roster around Carolina's core there to hope that you can potentially find your QB in 2024 free agency or in the draft at that point in time with ever, first year head coach that you have. So I don't hate the fit, but I also don't love it either. Mm-hmm. The next pick is actually the same team. Carolina takes Devon Achane 90th overall. So in the middle of the 3rd round there, Devon Achane, a guy that is probably going to blaze a 4.240 at the combine, one of the fastest players in the entire draft. At running back, again, another guy that we're worried about size-wise. We're not exactly sure if he's going to weigh in 190, if he's going to weigh in 200, if he's going to weigh in 210. If he can crack a decent size, though, this would be a great fit for him. There's not really anybody to speak of outside of Deontay Foreman, who's kind of been like a journeyman running back who's, obviously talented and productive. Devon Achane is almost like the better version of Chuba Hubbard. He's like a track athlete that, can take it the distance, but provide you a little bit more as a receiver and a little bit more consistency. So I actually really like the fit. I just would need to know, what Devon Achane kind of came in at. Because if he's a 190-pound back going 90th overall, he's probably not going to be anything more than a committee back for most of his career.
Yeah, I mean, if he landed in Carolina, he would quite literally just be Carolina Jerick McKinnon. in the sense, like smaller running back, really good receiver out of the backfield, jets when he gets in the open space. That's the kind of comp that I see for him, which I kind of like. However, I mean, obviously here, the size concerns are really, really big. If he's only, 5'9", a buck 85, how our team's going to react. 90th overall seems to be like they took it, well to a certain degree. Never really going to figure into, a 20 carry per game type of role. But if he can get, 6, 7 targets a game, maybe 10 carries a game, be that, elusive wide or running back too, especially in PPR, I think it could be really good. It's just funny to think about if you were to combine last year's Texas A&M running back with this year's Texas A&M running back, put them together. I mean, you're legitimately looking at maybe even a better prospect than Bijan.
Yeah, they both had some good complementing traits to each other, but neither of them really fit the bill of like your full-fledged workhorse 3-down guy. Devon Achane actually too. The absolute ceiling for a guy like Devon Achane is like maybe once he gets to the NFL, he puts on some weight and he becomes like Tony Pollard. I think that's possible for somebody like Devon Achane, but probably not a guy that I'm going to bet on depending on his size. So let's go rapid fire. These final 6, we'll kind of just go back and forth. I'll let you go 207 with Zach Evans.
Yeah, 207, Zach Evans, running back, 84th overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars in this mock. Obviously, the main, elephant in the room here is what exactly is going to happen here. Travis Etienne's already in town. Assuming in this scenario, you're probably moving on from Travis Etienne after his rookie deal. However, the reason why Evans falls, when you can argue that he's probably more talented than this spot, is that we know at least for year 1, he's going to operate as the main handcuff and not really have some starting appeal. So, yeah, he's talented. He might be stuck behind Etienne for 2 years.
Yeah, it's kind of like the A.J. Dillon situation, his rookie year. 208, Jalen Hyatt, 64th overall to the Bears. Jalen Hyatt's kind of a one-trick pony, if I'm being honest. Like, just looking at his skill set, he's more of like a downfield threat. But he did have a 5-touchdown game against Alabama, which we can't really ignore. Chicago doesn't really have a ton of weapons that are established. They have Chase Claypool and Darnell Mooney long-term. I guess Jalen Hyatt would give them something in the verticality aspect of their game. I guess they'd have a lot of speed on that offense when you include Justin Fields and Khalil Herbert and those guys. So that'd be kind of fun. I think Jalen Hyatt's an interesting player there at 64th overall.
It would be funny if they went back to the Tennessee with a round 3 receiver last year and then another one round 3 receiver this year. Only problem is the round 3 receiver they took last year is quite literally older than you. So big pain. Next receiver off the board, Rashee Rice going at 209, 40th overall pick to the New Orleans Saints here. He just... I know they play different, but this just really seems like the Jalen Tolbert hype from last year, where he's a small school player, a lot of numbers. He's landing in a decent spot with New Orleans, especially if they can figure out the quarterback position. But he's just not really somebody I can get truly excited about. I don't know what it is. Well, do you have anything to add there?
No, I got to sit down and watch the guy a little bit more, but NFL teams seem to like him. Pretty much every mock draft you'll ever see, he's going borderline first round in most of them. So he's definitely got some traits that teams are excited about. So that's pretty much all I have on Rashee Rice, other than the fact that he was productive and that NFL teams like him right now. I wish I could report more, but decent fit, receiving targets and stuff available behind Olave in the long term. Then we have 210, Dalton Kincaid. 57th overall to the Cincinnati Bengals. Again, a productive tight end goes to a good offense. I think it's interesting. I'm not exactly sure how he's going to test overall, but he was pretty much the most productive player on his team the last couple of years, and he's been one of the more productive tight ends. He kind of reminds me a little bit, and I fell for this trap a couple of years ago with Hunter Long from Boston College. They kind of ran their whole offense through Hunter Long, and I think that might be kind of what we got with Dalton Kincaid here in Utah, but it also could be like a Pat Freiermuth situation, which what we saw at Penn State, where it's like, not a overly wow factor tight end prospect, but he's going to be productive in PPR because he kind of just knows how to play the position.
Also, I mean, you talk about landing spot, obviously with tight ends, it's kind of a crapshoot at that point, but 57th overall to a team like Cincinnati, who could be moving on from Hayden Hurst after this year, who could need, that ancillary, wide number 4 type of weapon in this offense, obviously a very efficient offense. You're not expecting Kincaid to go out there and record 1,000 yards every year on a team like Cincinnati, but if he could be, a 600, 700 yard tight end, maybe catch 6 to 10 touchdowns a year, you're going to be fine with this 210 overall pick. Not really much excitement, but given the landing spot, given the efficiency of the offense, one that's well worth this pick. 211 off the board, Zay Flowers, wide receiver, going 51st overall to the Seattle Seahawks. And this would just basically be the Seattle long-term plan to replace Tyler Lockett. Tyler Lockett, long in the tooth, older receiver. You're getting a receiver that kind of fits that mold where, slider type of guy, 5'10", a buck 80 or so. Never really going to be, that true X receiver, but that's what you got DK Metcalf for. If you can get him into the system, Geno Smith playing good ball, Zay Flowers, a lot of people, for example, Mike Renner really like this guy. So if he could fit on that team, potentially be the wide receiver 3 right off the bat, wide receiver 2 long term, you can do much worse with the 211.
I'm not going to call him Dwayne Eskridge or Tutu Atwell, but like, it seems like every year there's like 3 guys that are 170 pounds that everybody says like just moves different than everybody else. And to me, Zay Flowers kind of just like is the next guy in line.
Another
Not
guy,
a great,
yeah.
Production profile either, at least like age adjusted production. So, I mean, he's fine, I guess, but I'm probably not going to be too interested in a guy that's like 5'8" and 175 pounds. Marvin Mims, also another guy that's a little undersized as well. 75th overall to the Atlanta Falcons, closes out the 212 of this draft. A lot of targets available there. They're starting Olamide Zacchaeus and shit. So I think he'd just be kind of interesting alongside Drake London and Kyle Pitts. We don't really know how they would handle quarterback based on this mock draft, but a guy that's interesting with top 75 draft capital nonetheless.
Yep, no, for sure. We can pretty much wrap it up. The last thing I kind of want to make note is what you guys will notice, the trend of this video is realistically after the mid-second round, you're not really getting too excited with a lot of these picks.
Yeah, and I mean, Corum going back to school makes that a little bit weaker now,
yes.
too. Boutte came back and said he is going to declare for the draft, but we lost Corum. So it's kind of a wash from that perspective. Yeah, I would say for those of you guys that got a bunch of mid to late second rounders, I would maybe try and offload those for like, guys that we talked about in yesterday's video, the Dynasty wide receiver buys and sells. You can offload, 2 late second rounders for an Elijah Moore or something like that. I wouldn't be opposed to doing that at all because you might get a way more stable asset than some of the guys you're going to be looking at in this mock. And again, I would say, relatively speaking, too, this was a pretty fantasy-friendly mock draft, too. It's like if we don't get, maybe a quarterback or two that slides outside the first round, then we might have actually had a worse spot, at the 204, 205 area where we were at. So definitely interesting to see. Again, this is why we do these exercises. We want to know the value pockets. We want to know, how the draft capital is kind of unfolding. We want to know what teams are thinking about these players. Again, check out the mock draft. I'll link it down below in the description, in the comment section, whatever. If you want to go check out the full thing, there was obviously, defensive players and stuff taken in the mock as well. But again, if you enjoyed, leave a like down below, subscribe to the channel. If you guys are new around here, comment down below your favorite fit, your favorite pick out of this mock draft, and we will definitely engage with you down in the comments. Check out our video yesterday, like I said, Dynasty wide receiver sells and buys, and we'll also have that for the running back position, quarterback position, the rest of the week as well. Also, make sure to check out the Underdog Fantasy Contest. 1 of 5 $50 on-site credits could be yours if you use the promo code FSE before wildcard weekend. So definitely check that out. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.
Wire me the money.